50 years ago 2 British sailors went missing in a submarine 150 miles off Ireland at a depth of about 1,500 feet. After 3 days of being trapped in the 1.8-meter diameter steel submarine, the men had only 12 minutes of oxygen left when they were rescued. It was August 29, 1973, when former Royal Navy officers Roger Chapman and engineer Roger Mallinson went missing at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean in an accident. At that time, Chapman was 28 and Mallinson was 35. They were rescued after a 76-hour international rescue operation after losing contact. Pilot Roger Chapman and senior pilot Roger Mallinson launched Pisces 3 at 1:15 p.m. as usual. This Canadian commercial submarine, chartered by the Irish Post Office, was laying a transatlantic telephone cable 150 miles southwest of Cork, Ireland. It usually took about 40 minutes to get to a depth of 1,600 feet, or 500 meters, and a little less than that to come back up, Chapman said. We used to do 8-hour shifts, traveling on the seabed at half a mile an hour, setting up pumps and jets and then laying the cable and making sure the cable was completely covered. It was very slow and dirty work. Mallinson says that the reduced visibility made the job extremely tiring. It was like traveling on a motorway in heavy fog and trying to follow a white line. You have to be incredibly focused on it. A pilot would control the submarine in one hand and hold a manipulator in the other that could be moved to the right, left, forward or up and down. Then we would share this work. It was very difficult work. We had to do this on our knees. Mallinson did not sleep for 26 hours after his shift. The PIS manipulator was damaged on the previous dive, so I spent the whole day repairing it, he says. I knew the PIS 3 inside out because I reassembled it here when it came in parts from Canada. It was their luck that Mallinson decided to replace the oxygen tank in the meantime. The oxygen tank had plenty of oxygen for one dive, but I don't know why I decided to convert it to a full tank. It was not an easy task because it was very heavy. I could have been reprimanded for changing the tank that still had half the oxygen left, but if I hadn't, we wouldn't have survived. Along with laying cables, pilots also had to take care of themselves. Every 40 minutes they would turn on the lithium hydroxide fan to flush out the carbon dioxide they were breathing out. When they returned to the surface at 9:30 a.m., they were waiting for the tower line to be attached to bring them back to the ship. Chapman explains that at this time there were sounds of ropes and chains hitting the submarine, which was a normal thing. But then all of a sudden the submarine started to go down very fast and we started going straight down. A small watertight compartment where the machinery is located had water seeping in due to its hatch being removed. The submarine had suddenly become very heavy. We were having a lot of shocks, Mallinson says. It was so scary, like everything was damaged or broken. They first switched off the electrical system, thus pitching in complete darkness. They also shed 181 kilograms of weight to make the submarine lighter. It only took us 30 seconds to hit the bottom of the ocean, Mallinson says. We turned off the depth gauge at 500 feet, 152 meters, because it could explode and brought our knees up to our heads using the pillows there to protect ourselves from injury. We put a white cloth in our mouth to protect our tongue from injury. When the submarine hit the bottom, Mallinson's first thought was to be thankful he was alive. He later learned that it had hit the bottom at 40 miles per hour, 65 kilometers per hour. It was 9:30 and 1,575 feet deep. We were not injured but we had cuts everywhere, he says. We were sitting there with flashlights. We didn't know we had hit a crater, so we were below the ocean floor. Contact attempt. The two got in touch on the phone and sent word that they were both fine, in high spirits and managing themselves. He also said that early indications suggest that their oxygen supply will continue till Saturday morning. He had 72 hours of oxygen at the beginning of the journey, but had used 8 hours of oxygen before that. Now they had only 66 hours left. According to Chapman, the two spent the first few hours organizing themselves. The submarine almost capsized and we had to reconfigure it, fix our equipment and make sure there were no leaks, he says. They decided that if oxygen was to remain, they would need to use very little. If you don't use oxygen, you use a quarter of the oxygen, you don't talk and you don't move, he says. According to Mallinson, the two lay down as high as possible from the foul, heavy air sitting downward. The internal diameter of the submarine was only 6 feet, so they had less space. We barely spoke, just held each other's hands and after a while squeezed each other to show we were okay, he says. It was very cold. I wasn't in a good shape anyway because I hadn't eaten much because of acid reflux 3 or 4 days ago, but our job was to survive. Meanwhile, rescue efforts were underway at the sea level. The aid ship Vickers Venturer, then in the North Sea, was contacted at 10:30 a.m. and instructed to bring back the submarine Pius II. The Royal Navy's HMS Hackett was sent to the scene at 12 hours 90 minutes with special ropes and RAF Nimrod aircraft flew overhead. A U.S. Navy submarine Crew 3 designed to retrieve bombs from the sea was sent from California and the Canadian Coast Guard ship John Cabot departed from Swansea.